Hello, beloved. It's me, James, and it's time for us to do sacred reading together. We are in the Hebrew Bible book of Ruth, chapter 2. I had originally planned for us to read verses 4 through 9, but today I think we're just going to read verse 4. I took a look at it just before I started reading and thought, I think we can get away with just the one verse. At least give it a try. If you don't know what sacred reading is, if this is your first time joining us, I want you to know exactly what sacred reading can be for you. Now, first of all, I'm going to lay out some guidelines that I find helpful for me, but you can do Lectio Divina or sacred reading the way you wish. When I do it, I choose a sacred text. Many times it's a Bible text, but it could also be any mystical writing or other kind of writing that I consider to be sacred. And I listen for the echoes of spirit in the writing. What is speaking to me? What's calling out to me? What's inviting me to a deeper place? And so I listen for a word, a phrase, an image that rises. It might be a word of encouragement. It might be a word of calling me out and inviting me to reflect on what I'm doing with my life. It might be an invitation to a new practice or a way of seeing things that I hadn't before. In any case, sacred reading, it can be especially helpful in times when we might be struggling to figure out exactly what to say, perhaps in prayer or in our lives, and we're looking for some sense of presence, of guidance, of connection. And for me, sacred reading does just that. I encourage you, if you do sacred reading, to choose your text, to make it a short text, because that way you can really try to plumb the depths of what it might have to say to you. You can always move on if that first short text doesn't really speak something that you need to hear. If you need to stretch it out, you can read another. It's not about the rules. It's about opening yourself to the Spirit's movement. So if one verse, one sentence doesn't work, read some more. If one works, then it's a good place to stop. It's not a rush to get through. It's taking your time to listen. So I read it aloud to myself 3 times. We don't do that here in this weekly kind of episode that we do of sacred reading. We just read it once. We sit with it for a second. You can tune away at that point, or I will share any reflections that come to me from the passage, not because they're the only ones, but because they're the ones that rose for me, and perhaps they'll inspire you to see how you listen to a text and maybe hear what you need to hear in any given moment. Again, we're taking a look at Ruth chapter 2, and today we're just looking at verse 4. Now, I'm going to set the scene before I read it, just because you may not remember, this may be your first time coming. We have heard the story of Naomi and her husband, Elimelech, and their 2 sons. There was a famine. They moved to Moab so that they could provide for each other and take care of themselves, moved on. While they were there, both of the sons got married to 2 Moabite women. Naomi's husband, Elimelech, died, and Naomi's 2 sons died, leaving her and the 2 daughters-in-law together, Orpah and Ruth. The name of the book, Ruth. Naomi knows that she needs to go back to Bethlehem, where she's from, because women didn't have access to taking care of themselves financially in the time of this writing. They needed to be attached to a brother, an uncle, a father, a husband, someone who would help provide for them. That's just the way that it was. Whether you think it's right or wrong, that's the setting in which this is written. And so they ultimately, Orpah stays behind in Moab. And while Naomi encourages Ruth to do the same, Ruth comes with her. And so they have arrived back in Bethlehem, And we left off the last time with Ruth going out to glean in the fields, a practice of following behind the harvesters and picking up any grains that were left, that were missed. And so that's where we find our story having left off. And she's in the field of a man named Boaz, who is a member of Elimelech's clan. So let's listen together for what we may hear in verse 4 from the book of Ruth in chapter 2. It so happened that Boaz had just returned from Bethlehem. He greeted the harvesters by calling out, "The Lord be with you." They shouted back, "The Lord bless you." So, I don't know what you may have heard, and you may think, "Wow, it's Boaz coming back, waving at his workers, greeting them, and they greet him back." What might be gleaned there? I liked, in all honesty, it's so much of life is set around preferences when we listen to things, I suppose. Try to suspend those when I'm doing sacred reading, but I appreciated the way that they greeted one another. When Boaz returns and sees his workers, his words are a word of greeting, but they're also a word of blessing. The Lord be with you. And the worker's response is one of a blessing back. In fact, directly the words are, "The Lord bless you." That relationship or that sense of connection that I hear there, where we bless one another, where it's not merely perfunctory to greet one another, to say hello to one another, but moves beyond the niceties of civil society toward an encouragement, a word of blessing, wanting the divine to bring the very best to the one with whom you're speaking. Now imagine, see, to me that represents kind of an attitude. Now you may say to me, and it may very well be true, if this were a deep Bible study, you might say to me something like, "Well, James, the Lord be with you," might have simply been the way of greeting, along the same way that most of our Arabic Muslim sisters and brothers, say "Salam alaikum," peace be upon you. It could have just been an everyday greeting. And maybe it is for them. Maybe it was for them. But for me, hearing "the Lord be with you," "the Lord bless you," what I hear is a kind of intentional sense that the presence of the divine in every relationship, in every greeting, in every moment that we encounter, I'm invited to see that just saying hi to the person who's helping me check out when I go to the grocery store, just saying hi to the person who is preparing my coffee or whatever it may be, and doing so with a kind of intention behind it, a sense of purpose, and that purpose being to wish the very best to the person in front of me, not just perfunctorily, but actually with a sense of meaning, of intention, of recognizing our common humanity and what binds us together. From my perspective now, as a person who follows the path of Jesus, but from my perspective, what binds us together is that sense of belonging to one another, of connecting to one another, And so I love that greeting. I love the way that greeting sort of brought a sense of blessing and connection, relationship into those moments, between the boss and the folks who worked in his field. But there was still a sense of connection, of belonging together, of community. And I guess I could wish for more of that in my everyday life, to be more intentional about setting that up when I greet people. Not just to say hi, but say hello to really discover that sense of connection I feel with the other to whom I find myself speaking. Just a thought for today that arose for me from this reading in Ruth. Next week, we'll pick up with Ruth chapter 2. We will pick up with verse 5. That was originally part of today's plan, but I saw the one verse and thought it might be worth looking at. Remember, whatever you find in the passage, if you go and read it by yourself, that you are infinitely precious and unconditionally loved for the gift you already are. Thanks so much for joining me for Sacred Reading.